the whole meeting and for March 17. We'll start with the approval of the agenda. We have one new business item, which is our 2026 operating budget. So a motion to approve the agenda. Councillor Fox makes the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on to new business. We have our 2026 operating budget, and we'll ask our Director of Finance to excitingly share with us budgets.
Thank you, Mayor Fader. Good evening, Council. Tonight, we are taking a look at our 2026 operating budget and taking our first stab at 2026 mill rates for our municipality. What I've presented tonight in your package is the 2026 operating budget, which is our 2026 provisional operating budget, which was passed in December of 2025. And there's been a few adjustments to that budget. Most of the time it's just some wages. I get the insurance documentation, so that's up to date and current, our insurance costs. Anything that happened at year end that maybe wasn't considered in the provisional budget. So those adjustments and changes have been made. And also when council saw the 2026 provisional budget, it was a balanced budget and it was based on our 2025 assessment and our 2025 mill rates. So tax revenue was held static in that budget and it was balanced. So now this new iteration of the 2026 budget has our 2026 assessment. So that new assessment is built into this budget, but it is still using 2025 municipal mill rates. So that's one of the big changes. Another thing that's changed since you guys saw it for provisional is that we have received the 2026 Alberta School Foundation Fund requisition for education taxes. So that's been factored in, and that mill rate for the province has been put into this budget and the requisition. And also the Lodge sent us their requisition. So that requisition and those mill rates have been factored in. So I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look through the document. I don't know if you want to go through it page by page. I will say at the end of the budget, it is showing a surplus now with the new mill rate and the 2025 mill rates for our municipality. There is a surplus showing, so that's where we're going to start our mill rate discussions when we get there. Other than that, I don't know. Where do you guys want to start?
Thank you for the introduction on that. We could probably start by looking at some of the other data you showed, just kind of provide some context. Would that help? I think some of the charts speak a bit of volumes, and then we can probably land on the spreadsheet that you have sent us last. And then the mill rates discussion sheet, you have that as a separate one, right? We didn't get that one in our package, the one that we usually use to adjust the rates, or are we going to do that in the big one now? Oh yeah, this one here. Perfect. So does anyone have any questions regarding some of the charts that we had for background info? Councillor Monteith has a question.
Aren't we starting backwards? Shouldn't we start with the budget, come the budget, and then see how it impacts us, as opposed to looking at what the results were before we pin down the budget?
We've looked at the budget already, so it's not like we haven't looked at it.
Well, there's some numbers there that are quite a bit different, so I have some questions.
On the revenue side?
Well, and expense side.
Okay. Do we want to make some highlights then on changes made on the current proposed operating budget in comparison to the one that we passed as an interim budget. Is that what you're suggesting, Councillor Monteith?
Well, I think we should get answers to questions we have, whether we go through it or not again. I'm not privy to say that, but I do have some questions
Okay.
that I think affect where we start. So that's why I think we should look at the budget first.
Okay, let me, Councillor Patience, did you have anything you wanted to check in with, or Councillor Orr, as new council members before we dive in too far?
I
know
just
you've
have
s-
a couple minor things as we go through it,
Okay.
but we went through this budget already.
Yeah, so it's
And
nothing
I asked all
crazy
my
new.
questions at that point, so
Okay.
just overall substance questions, mill rate, revenue will be my
Very good.
focus, so thank you.
Councillor Orr, you're good? Anyone else have some preliminary thoughts, comments before we look through the draft budget? I am really curious to hear from Councillor Patience, though, in 2012. Do you know what that was?
I'm looking at it going, if we'd have raised mill rates 50% and tax revenue, like the, something, I wouldn't be probably sitting here today, so.
That was a real number? That was crazy. I seen that. I was like, how did that happen?
And that was at a time too, by the way, when we received the reimbursement from the province for
Yeah, so you wouldn't
significant
think you
amount
would
of
have
money,
needed that money.
so I don't buy that number at all. I know what we left with, so,
Okay,
yeah.
well, it's worth double checking, but when I seen that, I was like, okay, I'd like to hear the story behind that one. That
Yeah,
would've been fun.
so would I.
Okay, does that work, Chris, if we go over some of the high-level numbers on the budget and then go back to some of the,
Absolutely. If any of council has questions on the budget report that's presented, then we will discuss it. Absolutely.
did you want to make some highlights on things that you've seen changed? Or is there none besides?
So I have a whole, sorry, it's in my budget binder, which I didn't bring. I can go get it. So I kind of itemized what I remember having changed and all the bigger changes. Probably types of things did I change? So insurance, maybe some tweaking of wages. I redid the revenues for the utilities, for water, sewer, and garbage based on the first billing of the new year, based on the new mill rate or the new user fees that were in the bylaws. So those were all recalculated for water, sewer, and garbage. Like I said, I did insurance. If there was any changes from departments between the provisional budget and now, maybe a category that they needed additional expenses in, I changed that. I updated, once I got the new assessment, I updated the tax incentives and the tax incentives that will get paid out based on the applications that we've received for this coming up tax year. They'll come to council in April, the new tax incentives after the March 31st deadline for the new ones, and then the recurring ones, I've factored those all into the tax incentives that are in that report. Other than that, if council has specific line items they have questions on, I can answer that.
Okay, very good. Councillor Monteith?
Yeah, I compared this budget to the one in November, and there's a couple big changes. One is, why are industrial taxes going down $300,000? And the other is, we looked at the budget for the tax incentive, it was 98,000 in November, and now it's 427,000. Just wondering where these differences are coming from.
Sorry, what was the last one?
The tax incentive was 98,000 in November when we looked at the budget, and now it's 427, so I'm just wondering what
I
changed
think there's a
dramatically.
good answer for that one.
So it will be coming to council with the new tax incentive applications in April, but the structural truss Formasteel building has now been completed, and it is, I don't think it's I don't know, See, now there's personal private information. Anyway, it's a large assessment. And the first year of that assessment, if you factor in that 100% of the municipal taxes are forgiven that first year, that's the big dollars that go into the tax incentive. So that's industrial. So that's the big change there, Jim.
Industrial taxes, sorry, you lost me there at the end.
So yeah, it's an industrial assessment. So the industrial assessment would have went up by the rest of that. Oh, thank you. By the rest of that.
But industrial taxes went down by 300,000. That's why I'm wondering between last year and this year.
From the 1.5 million?
Yeah.
It used to be 1.8 something you said?
Yeah, just a sec.
Maybe while Jim's looking for that, Chris, I would have found that, and I didn't read this till today, unfortunately, but I would have found it a little easier to follow if you'd have had the 2025, but at least budget on there, or our actuals as close as we had, so that I had a little better base to compare with. And I know you can do that fairly easily on those variance reports.
So according to what I used for provisional budget, the industrial taxes at that point were 1.25 million in my documentation.
Yeah, I must have been reading it.
You made a mistake? Is that what I heard? Okay. Let's shut the meeting down. Okay, any other questions, Councillor Monteith?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just a follow-up question on the tax incentive. When do we get, and maybe we got it already, but I'm just curious as to just a report on the number of applications we've had and that kind of stuff. What do we get on that? Do we get that annually? Do we get it semi-annually? Just kind of curious, you know.
So our deadline for the new applications is March 31st. So I will be bringing everything to council for April 13th meeting. So it would be just an overall how many applications we've had to date, how many are in the queue, who's at year 1, who's at year 2, who's at year 3, both for non-residential and multi-unit residential applications.
And do we have a provision in that bylaw to review the percentages on an annual basis, or is there some kind of a stipulated review?
There is. I think it was longer than a year, though. I think it was a 3-year term.
3-year term.
Or something, but
Okay.
yeah, that's definitely on the website too. The incentive bylaw. Okay. Do we want to go and kind of review some of the historical numbers to give some context before we jump into mill rate discussion then? Does that work for everyone, or do we have other questions? So maybe a little bit of context. CEO Burdette, did you want to give us some highlights from those?
Sure, we can take a look at the data that was requested. I did search up all of the historical data for mill rates and assessments and stuff just came from our bylaws. So there was some comments made about the 2012 amount of 7.8 and 17, and that's what we have here on our bylaw. So I don't have any other circumstance or situational evidence on if there was something other than that. But yeah, so I can pull up. Yeah. So we did compile quite a bit of data for council to review. within this sheet, if you are, familiar with sheets, Excel workbooks, there's quite a bit of information here. Each year's 2 columns for that specific year, and then the descriptions on the left. Some of the things we wanted to capture here, I guess the theory behind this was to demonstrate, growth in total revenue of its, total tax revenue, residential versus non-residential. Also some things like at the very bottom of the Excel spreadsheet, is that on this one? Oh, it's on the printed one too, great. Some things like inflation. So I took $100 in 2010 because that's when we started, and I used the Bank of Canada website to show it's a basket of goods to show that will be $143 by 2026, so that we could kind of view and compare, well, how have taxes happened, how have taxes have increased, how assessments have increased, where we are for mill rate, where that's been tracking. We summarized, oh, that looks terrible. My apologies. Summarized a few of those in some graphs, just to kind of show how things are looking over the years. The one up on the screen now is the mill rate history. And when you compare that to the total tax revenue, municipal tax revenue history, you can see it climbing, essentially driven by the assessment increase that started, increasing quite steadily from 2021 upwards. And so the town has been reducing all mill rate to reduce the amount of effect that the increase in assessment has. But obviously the town has also experienced the increase in costs along with those inflationary amounts that have occurred. Yeah, so there's quite a bit of data here. A couple of things that I thought were really neat and I think really beneficial to the town of Fort Macleod and unique about us is, and we've had actually a pretty good percentage for the 15 years, it has improved, but our residential to non-residential taxes, we have a 55-45 split. For example, Raymond, Alberta has a 95-5 split, where 95% of their revenues is from residential and 5% is non-residential. We looked up Claire's Homes too. I think they had, was it 18% of non-residential? So a lot of communities have a significantly lower amount of property taxes that is earned, I guess, created from non-residential taxes. And so that is one of the ways that our residential tax rate can be on the lower side compared to all of our neighboring towns. We'll exclude MDs because they're the only ones who beat us, but all of our neighboring towns, we do have the lowest mill rate.
Question about the tax revenue history. Is there any way that we can, I mean, at the end of the day, the final number is what matters, but to distinguish between the growth, so the number of units that are being taxed, and the increased value of properties. So there's been a growth, obviously, in the tax revenue, steadily increased, and there's two drivers as I see it. One is the increase in property values, and the other is simply the increase in the number of properties that are being taxed. And do we have any way to split that, or I'm just curious as to what is the primary driver of that? I know we've been growing, and I know that property values have already also been increasing.
Yeah, so that information is included. We'd have to do a little digging, probably just make a request from our assessor. But when he gives us our report, and we do have one in here, it shows how much is inflation, just the growth of the value, and then how much is new builds, right? Is it attributed to the new construction, so that you could piece out just that amount. I can actually pull that up. Yep.
And so you're saying that you're using the term inflation to account for increases in property value? That's what you're referring to as inflation, the value of the market value of properties, or okay.
So here, this is the 20. I'm on the right one, right, Chris?
2025 assessment for 2026 tax year.
Okay, perfect. So if you can see here, the new, so Chris, make sure I'm not leading anyone astray. The new is what's new builds, new additions. And then, or is that, sorry, that's
That's
growth.
just our new,
New 25 number, sorry. The,
assessment.
the growth is the new buildings.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Growth is the new buildings. And so you can see in residential, 16,700,000 in new construction. And then you can see inflation, this 8.3% is what drives this additional 35 million.
You saw pie charts at the end, is that what that?
Yeah, this should show the growth versus the inflation. If you see, yeah, residential top right pie chart. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah,
Yeah, it was just inflation of property values.
Yes.
Helps me to, okay, thanks.
Those have to be determined.
yeah, so they will be, yeah, once you establish the mill rate, then we'll know how much residential and non-residential property taxes will come in. And then there's a few things like population growth that we don't quite know yet. Yeah.
So if I throw those numbers in, it looks like it's a 8.5% increase per person. That's where with the same mill rates as last year.
Okay.
That makes sense because the assessment went up by 8% for residential and 7% for commercial.
What was our surplus 2025? Because we worked this budget originally off of the same revenue as last year when we went through it in December. And the reason I'm asking this, of course, is if we have a large surplus, then we should be lowering the mill rate to pull up that $300,000, because I don't see why we'd increase taxes by 8%.
Yeah, which we did last year, because last year's assessment was greater than this year, right? 13, so we reduced our mill rate by 5.25.
No idea yet, Crystal, what we're looking at for a surplus from 2025? Can you remember what 2024 was?
Are you asking?
We have a motion where I asked them to move the surplus into reserves. So,
And Councilor Patience, are you asking for the true surplus, like revenue over expenses, or the under the line adjustments that show, adding back amortization and all of that non-cash stuff to come with
No,
it?
I'm just
cash?
talking about the true cash surplus.
The true,
The
final.
point I'm trying to get
Yeah.
at is, I guess, if we had a healthy surplus that we transferred to reserve, then when we did the 2026 budget, we used the same revenue base as 2025 as a foundation to develop the budget. And so all I'm saying is, if with the increases in assessment, we're looking at an extra 300 and whatever thousand, then I think we should be looking at a mill rate reduction to eliminate that 300,000 if we were already carrying a healthy surplus. That's my point. Thank you.
Isn't our financial statement on the website?
The 2025, the 2025 isn't complete yet.
Or the 24
The
then?
24, yeah, you could see, it was, that was quick, Chris. Oh, no, keys.
be able to find the motion of that meeting, Amanda, where we
And
moved
Chris, I don't need
surplus.
the exact number, but if I recall, it was
It was-
healthy.
Yes.
It was, yeah.
I do remember reading it in the paper and going, oh, well, that's nice.
So we try to move most of the surplus into reserves, and then
100%.
we just leave a little bit to kind of
Yep.
flush through to I don't know what it's called, the surplus, the not spoken for surplus, unrestricted
Unrestricted, yeah.
surplus.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was healthy, and that surplus, that surplus that we push into reserve usually funds our capital assets for this coming year.
Yeah,
That's kind of how we roll, and that's kind of how we,
And we do budget departmentally for reserve allocations as well, right? So,
no, not anymore.
Yeah, and that's something that I think is not well understood or confusing, is that when we see in the paper this published big surplus, and then we allocate it to reserves, we really want some surplus there to allocate to reserves so that we are building that reserve fund so that we can use it for the things that we use it for. And so somehow, do we have a specific target that we're looking to be able to add to reserves each year, and whatever that division is into the various reserves, but some specific amount, so that it's reported that these surplus funds aren't really surplus as people would see them, but they're actually simply the amount that we are looking to put towards reserves for future capital projects or whatever else we use those reserves for. And even in setting the budget, we need to know what that target surplus is, the amount that we want to put into reserves.
So we had I think, a very valuable conversation with this last year when it came with our 13% increase in mill rate, or sorry, not mill rate, assessment. And we aim to do exactly that, where we put aside a portion. We still reduced the mill rate, but we put aside a portion so that it would go to our reserves. And so it was built in. So that amount is still built into this next budget. So this 380,000 currently above our budget because of the increased assessment. Within the budget is a $460,000 from operating to reserves, and that's built in so that we are putting away for the rainy day. We're putting away for capital investment, so that those things are happening, so that our reserve isn't being dwindled. And we thought last year, specifically because the assessment has increased, yes, the community, obviously has to pay for those things, but with the increased assessment, it was, I guess, more manageable at that time. But now that that's built in, so if we balance our budget to zero this year, we still have that $400,000 going to reserves.
I do recall that when we went through capital budget, because there was allocations into reserves and out of reserves. That's why I was confused. So thank you for clearing that up, that we do actually budget for reserve allocations. Thank you.
The other philosophy of that was it's easier to do it gradually than to hit the wall where you got to do it big time. So that was sort of part of the philosophy of doing it that way.
Just a conversation about comparative mill rates between communities. If in generalities, I think that's good. If we want to get into this too specific, we might want to go in camera on intergovernmental relationships. But yeah, we do have an item coming next council meeting for the ICF recreation funding to have that discussion. Yeah, we definitely, we can, if council chooses, we can go into camera at the end of this to chat about it, but we will be chatting about it more and more specifically regarding the recreation agreement next meeting. Sure. Do we want to, Miranda, you put me back up there? Review this first? I like this one. I do like this one. So this year, I mean, in previous years, we had a few other communities that were closer to our size, but they were way up north or, you know, further away from us. And so this year, we pretty much just took all of our neighbors, right? And so this first graph here demonstrates the municipal mill rate. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this one here is just the mill rate, just as the mill rate by itself. And as you can see, Fort Macleod is very competitive compared to towns of our size. Claresholm, I mean, we're competitive to even these bigger towns, Coaldale, Tabor, Raymond, Pincher Creek. We have a very competitive mill rate there. The only ones that are less than us are Lethbridge County, Cardston County, MD Pincher Creek, and MD of Willow Creek, coming in at first place. I don't know if that's the first place, but
Why are we comparing ourselves to MDs? Because they're different operations, so comparing their rates to our rates, I think it's just useless.
yeah, this edition was just on request by Mayor Fader, and it's more for the discussion. It's more for a different discussion, not our mill rate discussion, because it is different, but it's more of a bigger picture discussion in communication with the MD and how, you know, when it comes to supporting one another and how the different rates can have a huge effect on that. So did I capture that, kind of what you're thinking there, Mayor Fader? And then you have the non-residential comparison here. There's about, 8 of us kind of in the middle there where we're almost the same, but we are slightly on the high end. Yeah, and that's how that compares. This is one of our biggest selling points when we talk to businesses where they could establish in Lethbridge or Fort Macleod. We're almost half of the property tax amount of Lethbridge, which is a great selling feature for establishing your business in Fort Macleod. Yeah, so I just wanted to give those reference points so that you can see where we are, how we compare, and then that can give you some reference for what mill rates we go forward with.
Okay, very good. So we're back to this one. This, I think, indicates where we're at now, right?
And I'll just give you a little roadmap here. Your screen's died. It's because I said something about technology earlier today. I'm sorry, technology. No, nothing happened over here. I scrolled up, but. Right when we wanted to show you guys real-time changes. Miranda's gonna do what you can. I will explain to you using words. This one is did this one get sent out, Chris?
We bring it with us.
Oh, okay. Okay, so here we have our dashboard, and Chris puts a lot of work into this workbook. As you can see, the tabs down here, there are multiple tabs that take in the assessment and all of the information that's required and all the changes. And then we've summed it up to this front page dashboard to be as simple as possible so that we can make some projections, and then we can see how that affects. So this first blue box here just shows us our rates. We have residential, non-residential, then we have a vacant residential and vacant non-residential. Here you have your municipal tax changes from 2025. So the difference from one year to the next, percentage change. This surplus deficit, our current surplus will show that. That's the 380,000 that Chris had explained. And so any changes we make here will show how much the changes affect that surplus. Then this box on the right, average tax change for residents and businesses, this is us capturing the net change. So we make a change currently with nothing touched. You can see the market factor is 8.3% for a residential property. They would see a municipal annual increase of about 134, which works out to about $11 a month. And then their municipal plus education and lodge amounts would come to about a $225 increase annually, and that's on a $315,000 house, which is our average assessment. And then down here, non-residential, same thing. The market change 7.7. You see the annual increase of 404, but there should be a monthly 3374, and a total increase, including education and Willow Creek Foundation, of just under $400. So those are our kind of, our checks to make sure that when we make a big difference, what is it doing to the homeowner? What is it doing to the business owner?
Why is the total in non-residential higher than just with the municipal portion? It should make a lot more than municipal.
The total, the 225?
Municipal taxes go 404, if the total is 399. But you should add on the provincial and lodge, to get the water change it.
Yes, you should. I will find out why that is not mathing. We'll get to the bottom of that one, because this one seems like it's right. Okay, thanks. Obviously something's not working on the non-residential side, but we'll track where that one goes. Here are the input cells. For example, if we wanted to, what's that? 5.217. Are you looking at that's what you want the rate to be, or 5.217 down? Okay, so minus 6%. That shows 5.22, but yeah, it rounds up. So 6% reduction gives you that. And then you can see that the difference was we lost about 150,000. It's me. Breathing apparently affects it. Now this is working. I don't have that right in front of me. Chris, do you have the 25?
Chris, then maybe you know the net of the changes you made to the budget after we approved the interim in December, because we used last year's revenues as a base, right? So I'm curious how much that went up. Did some go down? I kind of doubt that, mind you, but wishful thinking.
Yeah, the biggest changes were just in the tax incentive program, like the considerable changes. There were some minor adjustments up and down. Yeah, we don't have that total just yet, but we can bring that up. Yeah, I mean here, if you see the municipal tax changes, on the far left, the municipal tax amounts are up about that 10%. I mean, that's just the taxes piece in this current situation, if that makes any sense. Right, so if you're looking for, we're back on? You changed it, so, okay. Great. Great. Yeah, so Mayfair, you're looking for just the total budget increase. Okay. Yeah, so the current surplus would be this, the 231,000 with everything else that was budgeted in. Yep. Yeah, so you could.
No, 1.5 on non-res. If all said, that would, why I got those numbers, because both would get a full 3% reduction once you include the provincial. Pardon me? Yeah, the way I kind of looked at that is both res and non-res, total of municipal or total mill rate, it would balance both, would have a 3% reduction. Because on non-res mill rate for the school, there's a 7.5 reduction in the mill rate. But on residential, there's a 2.5 or 4.3% increase. Do I read that right? Because it's not on here. That's the thing. But if you look into the school requisition, the non-res actually is getting a reduction in mill rate for the school. That's what the sheet is that we have.
Well, non-res is getting a reduced rate because there's more non-res assessment to spread around the cost. So the rate went down.
So if we use these rates right now, both res and non-res gets a 3% reduction. If you include the school total mill rate reduction. Which if we have a population increase estimated of 3%, then that would equal out to a 1% increase per person from last year to this year. Three 3% population increase if we did that, because the last 5-6 years it's averaged over 4% per year. So if we pencil in 3, because we have more taxpayers in the community, then that would equate to a 1% increase per capita if there was a 3% population increase. So those are just the quick stab I took at that. I think that halves the surplus rate, roughly, from 388 to 197. So we still would technically have $197,000 surplus, which I think doesn't hurt to put that extra into reserves to start working on our backlog of assets that we need to upgrade over the years.
So just to be clear, coming back to my previous question about a surplus and that being a planned surplus to put into reserves, this 197, is that above and beyond what our planned surplus was for reserves? Okay, I just wanted to confirm that, okay?
And it also doesn't take into account the actual physical surplus at the end of the year. This is just a budgeted surplus. So last year it was over $1 million. It was actually.
Most of that was land sales, so.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah.
That sort of skews it.
Yeah, and that is a tough one, right? And you don't want to get caught too hard on that either, because that could go away in a hurry.
It's like oil prices.
Yeah. So Mayor Fader, is what you're showing there, a reduction to a 5.22 residential mill rate would equate to average of about $29 a year per average household, is that correct, municipally? But of course, the province will take their major share of that, unfortunately.
I'm just curious, a lot of municipalities are talking about the great increase in the education tax. Like everywhere I'm hearing, they're talking about the provincial portion is going through the roof, but are we just an anomaly? Because I know Calgary is screaming about that one. and
Oh,
I-
no, our education taxes went up, but we have a lot more assessment,
yeah,
quite a bit more assessment to spread it around in. And that's why the rates that we have to charge to get that money back for non-res, it looks like it's lower than it was last year.
It's a set amount, right? Not not like part of a mill rate, eh? So we're charged $2 million for education. Bigger the population, the less each individual is being charged. Is that the way it works?
So education taxes is based on equalized assessment. So our assessment goes to the province equalizes it for growth or to make things fair for everybody in the province. There's a calculation that they do, and then they use equalized assessment to determine how much we'll pay for education taxes. So everybody gets the same rate for residential or farmland or non-residential school taxes, and then we take the money that we owe the province and we use our assessment, our actual assessment, not equalized assessment, our year's assessment, to figure out, based on our assessment and what they want from us, what everybody's got to pay. So there's a lot of moving parts.
So the amount that Fort McLeod is paying, is that increase the same as Calgary is being charged? Just we have more to spread it around?
I'm not sure how, I guess I could bring you guys the provincial report for equalized assessment to show you how we fare with other communities, but they don't adjust us, I don't know if they adjust us all the same.
So they take the total assessment and then divide it by population in Alberta? I'm just wondering how they come to this equalized assessment.
I do know when I saw on Global the impact on Calgary and Edmonton, it was vastly different. Calgary's increase in educational property tax was much higher than Edmonton's, dramatically, like hundreds of dollars per living quarter. So, yeah, I don't know if that's gross population, number of new schools. I don't know how they work that, honestly.
Just a note, that's actually why on the thing that you noted, Councillor Monteith, with the non-residential, the fact that the municipal amount was increasing 319, I think yours is the same, yeah, and that the total tax increase was 314 is because how the education piece is applied is actually a negative. And so, and the lodge amount is like $1. And so that actually takes out those $5. So that's why it makes sense. I was really scratching my head there for a minute to understand what was going on, but yeah, it's because of the negative.
That really doesn't make any sense to me. But again, as I've said before, nothing the provincial government does makes sense to me.
So that makes sense. So just kind of as an aside, and this is just looking down the road a bit, the amount that we're being assessed for our share of police funding is continuing to grow, and we've got our projections over the next few years. Are we, like, in this budget at this point, we've just been stomaching that and trying to keep our relative tax rates, increasing only slightly. But as that pressure mounts, are we looking at where we're going to need to increase more just to cover that additional police funding?
Yes, in short, right? Like
In
as
short,
that-
yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
we would have to increase it. I do know of some municipalities that are communicating that increase as its own line, to which the province was not impressed. Told them they weren't allowed to do that, but I guess they did it anyway. Just to demonstrate that it's an outside cost, you know, if we go up 600%, it's like, well, that's not really within our control.
Some of what we have to keep in mind is the tax incentive comes off too, right? So technically you're gaining that revenue over the next 3 years. So it's, in some ways, it's a built-in revenue increaser as well. This is the sheet I used. I made a few changes on it. I filled in the residential taxes based on the assessments. I think the formulas are right, but that's where I put in the 6%. And the next one has a 1% on the non-res. The two highlighted ones are a formula based on the mill rate and the assessment values that are down below. I think it all pans out. So on the bottom, you'll see the town's populations going 5.2, 2.9 all the way, and then I threw in a 3% just as for kicks. But bottom line, you'll see there's a 1% on tax revenue per capita. Is 1% last year. I do think that's why the community was hit hard, because it's 8.8, and that's where I think last year we probably didn't look at it as clearly as we should have in terms of with the mill rate. That's a big jump last year from 1,000 to almost 1,100. So it's a big increase, but now it's a 1%. Does it have to be 1%? No, but I think right now if like for the total residential mill rate, it's -3, and for the total non-res mill rate, it's -3 as well. Last year was about the same reduction as well, even though residential had a -4.5% and non-res had a 4% increase. It's still, well, one's -3.6, one's +3.5. So they're both, yeah, they're quite different. But this year they're both negative. 3%. That's how my head works, but yeah.
If I could, Mayor?
Yes.
One thing that, and we were thinking about this, and maybe we could improve the per resident. The per resident can be a bit more challenging, almost like maybe do per household, right? Like it's just because it depends on population of each household, but it definitely demonstrates something, right? The revenues that are coming in per our population. But we were thinking maybe a per household thing might have a little bit more accurate, I guess, useful information, but.
It's the burden each individual in town on average has to carry to pay for the operations of the town. That's about 1,100. So it's, and obviously businesses take up a good chunk of that, right? It's not a household, it's essentially. So the revenue, a lot of that 1,100 is still paid by someone other than residential properties. So, yeah, I think it gives us an idea. Yeah, good.
One other thing that I would like to draw council's attention to is the vacant residential and non-residential, and whether a discussion should be had on whether those rates are remaining the same, increasing, decreasing.
Yeah, I think that's a larger discussion that we stumbled on last year, right? Because how do we advertise that, let people know that are going to be impacted, because there are going to be a handful of those are going to have a lot bigger impact than. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, see over there.
Director of Finance Chris Hobeck, she reached out, I think in a letter, to all owners of vacant properties so that they're aware. The letter just advised them that they were getting a letter because they owned a vacant property, and there was possibility that the vacant rate might not equal the non-vacant rate. And so received some feedback, but yeah, it's, you know, the conversation has started.
And the option to them is either consolidate and to reduce some of those costs, because some of them are lots adjacent to active properties. Correct. So some of it's consolidate, there's that option. The option is obviously to sell, develop, or pay the extra taxes.
I did find one example today after receiving some feedback from one of our residents that, you know, caused me to scratch my head. So it is River Valley lands that they own, that they can only, they run cattle on it, because it cannot be developed for anything other than potentially a campground, right? But otherwise you can't build anything on there. There's some provision to, you know, you could build a shed for your cows because it's agricultural based. But it did cause me to reflect on, you know, circumstances where they can't develop, consolidate. I mean, they could sell, but there are some parcels, and especially in our river valley, that are a bit unique. So some things for us to consider.
And are they assessed as farmland? Because we do have a farmland assessment, right? So
They were
those
just assessed as vacant. I can see what this is.
straight vacant, not vacant farmland or something.
So could adjustment not be made to the bylaw just to suggest that properties that are unable to be developed based on land use restrictions don't apply to this particular bylaw?
Don't know. Based on our previous discussion, I thought the rules are pretty strict around it, and we don't have a lot of options.
It's all or nothing. I do believe, I'm not sure, I'm throwing it out just
Yeah.
to see if that, because if you can't develop, you can't develop, right? So
So those vacants are in your spreadsheet, right? So if we threw a 20% increase on both of those, what does that do? So it goes from 197 to 214, so an extra 18,000. Do we know how many properties that is roughly?
110 properties. Yeah. I've mentioned this before. I'm in agreement with others who think that we should be adding some additional mill rate to those vacant properties. I think some encouragement. I mean, we have a very generous, if I might say, tax incentive program for new builds. It seems that we should have at least some sort of inducement to encourage building, making use of a vacant property. And so whatever the process needs to be, whether we can do that in this go round or not, because again, it's something where we really want to have opportunity to hear from vacant property owners, but I think that's long overdue. And again, I'm not talking about a massive, huge increase, but I think, like Councillor Monteith says, we need to be looking at that.
Where is this listed in the assessment kind of documentation? Is that the exempt from the assessors, where it shows the growth and the? It doesn't show vacant, so I'm just wondering where that, because it looks like it's really heavily weighted towards non-res, right? Like when you change it to 20%, it only went up 2,000 for res, but it went up 14 for non-res. So it's only about 2,000 or 3,000 for res, which I think in some ways, I don't know, yeah. Do we know roughly the split on properties between res and non-res?
For vacant? So we have 39 vacant residential, 22 vacant commercial, and 49 vacant industrial, so that totals 110.
So it's about, yeah, so the assessment value of the residential is really low, must be.
Yeah.
So even if you did 30, yeah, left the resident, yeah, go 30% there and then tip 10% on unres. $15?
I'd go 10% on each myself.
No way, Jim. That's way too low for residential. I know. Well, I'm just, yeah. I think it's good to see the assessment value of those properties. But that extra 212, then that would, or the 212, that would go towards our surplus then. We would put it in the operational budget as an increased line item to go to
Yeah, we would add it to the adjustments to go to
from
reserves.
400 to
Yeah.
612 or whatever. Okay, so
You know, and just as a point of discussion, perhaps, Mayor Fader, that
yeah,
30% does seem a little dramatic first year since we've had the subclassing bylaw and not used it to date, but even a program of 10% a year for the next 3 years, 4 or 5 years, whatever the case may be, just so people understand the premise behind it. And I guess the point is not to garner additional revenue, the point is to get their land into production, right, if possible.
yeah.
But I'd be curious what the total dollar value is for that, if we're playing with a 10%, 30%. Yeah, just to see what that actual dollar value is.
Yeah, 10% is, yeah, it's going to be not even on residential alone. 10% is going to be like less than 2,000, I think it was.
Chris is going to take you to one of her fantastic tabs there. Don't you want to go to the assessment dashboard, Chris? One more tab over, no? Shows you
Assess
the
dashboard.
valuation. Because this one shows that the total vacant residential assessment is 2 million and total non-vacant residential assessments is 6 million.
And the average those are the average assessments for vacant
50.
res and vacant non-res.
That's non-town owned, right? Land, vacant land?
Yeah, none of that's town owned, correct, Chris?
All town-owned land is exempt. Where did it go, Miranda? There it is.
I'd be curious to know how much of the vacant land is actually suitable for development. I have the same, I guess, issues with this as we've previously discussed, where there seems to be just a variety of uses on these lands. Like we said, you know, some of it is good for development, some of it is being used for private storage, some of it is just a vacant lot that's part of a property, some of it is in the river valley, not suitable for development. And so again, for me, if there's lands that's not suitable for development, it's hard to justify an increase in the mill rates on them, in their taxes, if that's the main reason why we want to do this. If we want to, you know, develop land that people are just sitting on, then that's great. But there's lots of, I think it was last year when we went through the properties, I looked through a bunch of it, and yeah, there's properties out there that or just people's private storage or stuff like that. And so I'm a little less comfortable lumping everybody in together for a tax increase. So, and as was mentioned before, you know, we are limited when we classify a property as vacant. You know, it's tough to make subclasses in that, under that. And so that's just my issue that I have with, you know, too drastic of jump in the taxes for these properties.
I think that's fair. I think the number of properties that would be undevelopable are probably pretty low. Would you say? Like River Valley might be
Yeah, I don't
one or
even know.
two.
And again, you know, if it's a private property, or, you know, a person's property and they want to use it for a certain use, you know, I don't think our desire for what that property should be supersedes that. You know what I mean?
But
Yes and
just
no.
so say we've got an industrial property, you know, a small lot, and they've developed on one lot, they own two lots side by side, they've developed on one lot, and they use the other one for storage and parking and this and that. On the one, they're paying the full non-res rate, and on the other, they're paying a vacant rate, and yet it's all part and parcel of their business. It seems that I don't think I have an issue in that scenario to having that vacant lot paying a little higher tax, because it is part and parcel of, if they want to, that's their cost of doing it. They could consolidate if there's a tax advantage to doing that, but in my mind, it should almost be to the point where there is no tax advantage. And you have a little bit of an increase on that vacant. But I appreciate your point there that, you know, there are going to be some differences, but I wonder how
Yeah,
many,
definitely.
how many differences there are in that.
Yeah, and definitely, I think there's, you know, lots of properties that do fall under that, where it's probably beneficial for them to consolidate. And so I do see both sides. Like, it's, you know, it would be good to free up some lands for development, consolidate to clean things up and stuff. And so, yeah, there's just you know, there's those properties that don't fall neatly into that I think, you know, would raise concerns with having their taxes raised for these purposes.
The taxes they're paying on those properties are so low already. You put 10% extra on the town's portion of that mill rate, it's going to be dollars, a lot of them. So I don't think we have to be too shy, because we do want to encourage people to actually think about what they can use their property for, rather than just sit on it for years and years and years. Like you drive through Nanton and you see customers with big concrete blocks around their vacant properties. It's that to me is what we don't want, is people so protective of a vacant lot that's not doing anything, it's not adding any value to the town. It's just sitting there. And I think that's what we want to encourage ratepayers to think about. Because to develop new properties is expensive. It's very expensive. So if we have underutilized land, then technically the extra revenue should spur them to develop it, or help us with developing more land if they're not developing it. But you'd have to raise that a whole lot to make a difference for the town. But yeah, so that's my Councilor Monteith.
I don't know why anyone would consolidate, because you consolidate, you're paying 11.71, you leave it vacant, you're paying 5.55. So consolidating isn't going to reduce your tax, it's going to increase it.
Sorry, how?
You consolidate, you're going to be assessed, and you're going to pay 11.71 mill rate. You leave it vacant, you're paying 5.55. So why would you consolidate?
Those are two different classes of land, though.
I know, but once you consolidate, it's all non-residential. It's not vacant.
It's based on the zoning, so whether it's an industrial lot, it's still assessed at an industrial valued lot.
I know, but that, you're going to pay more tax on that than you would on a vacant. Are you not?
I don't think that's how it works, because if it's a residential lot, it gets assessed at residential value. So if now they're doing 5.55 and then currently, they're actually getting a reduction this year, whereas right here, we're showing it goes from 5.22 to 6.11. So if they consolidate it, it goes from 6.11 to 5.22. And in some ways, it saves the town administrative tasks because there's less tax rolls. Residential, I don't think you're going to see a lot of consolidation because there's maybe a few that might if they have a big, huge yard. That's a separate lot rather than consolidated. I don't know if there's any of those. Maybe a few. But technically, like we know some lots in town are basically a house on two lots. They should be consolidating. If they don't, then
So I have a question. Should we be inclined to increase the taxes or a mill rate for vacant land? Do we have, in terms of the timeline that is set for the passing of our budget, do we actually have time to do that this year? To have the public engagement that we need and to meet the timelines that you've set out for the passing of this budget?
I guess it depends on what type of public engagement you want. The letter's been sent, people have been calling, asking questions about what the letter means for them, talking about the property that they own, leaving some comments. But if you want more analysis, like what types of properties each of these vacant properties are, like what's their use, then we're not
That
gonna
kind
have
of thing
time.
we can
Yeah.
push, right? But if, like, would this be something where we would have a public hearing at a council meeting to discuss, give people opportunity to
No.
talk it through?
So the public
Give us a
hearing,
no?
yeah, so this, I mean, when these subclasses were created, we did give the opportunity, right, in which we did not receive much feedback. But that, the whole formal process about the required participation been gone through.
so bottom line is on the 5.22 and 11.53. Does that seem reasonable then on those two numbers to at least start penciling in numbers? And then for the vacant residential, non-residential, do we want to leave it at the 10 or do you want to go a little bit more?
I'm wondering, Chris, I realize that you're not gonna analyze all the vacant properties, we don't have time to do that. But are there things that stand out on those assessment lists under vacant, whether it's residential or non-residential? Like, are there some large properties that would be involved there and take up a lot of that assessment under those subclasses?
Some of the ones that I've seen that are residential, that are vacant, are probably just purchased and in development, a lot of them. Some of them are lands that have been in the residential, again, have been vacant for decades and have just been sitting out near the airport. Some of the industrial ones are owned by companies. I don't know if they're just haven't consolidated large yards and they're all still kind of chopped up into lots. Like, I didn't look into it, but there were some that there was one company name and they had 5 or 6 vacant properties. So I didn't look in to see if they were in the same geographic area and they were just part of a larger space that wasn't consolidated. But we could look into that. But there was a lot of, there was nothing that was really too that jumped out at me. Some people just had 2 lots and one lot had their house and one lot had their yard. So there's just a multitude of different scenarios.
What does 15% look on both? Yeah, what the number is in the end, it's not a huge number, so in that range anyways.
the size of the number, it's the size of the percentage increase that's going to cause the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, and probably more so the dollar amount on their tax bill. So if it is $5, most people won't blink an eye.
No,
But yeah,
it's gonna be it's 100 properties, and you said it went up by, I think we said, what would it be at now? 210, 211, 2.
yeah. Does it show that? Oh, I guess it doesn't
You
show
put it
that
to
for the
0?
vacant ones.
Both of them to 0. You can put both of them to 0. See what the original one was.
The original's 197.
Okay. So 13,000 divided by 100 properties, you're looking at. Yeah. So
For the year?
if yeah.
$10.
Start there for now. You go in 10, so you want to go 20?
And that's going to be skewed somewhat between non-res and residential, so we could say we've got non-res, non-res is a bigger portion of that, so.
Non-res is taking the bulk of that dollar value by far.
Calculate 110 right here for each, that's going to be less for the
Yes.
res and a little bit more for the non-res.
Bigger lots, more value.
In my mind, business, if they're just sitting on a lot or they're consolidated or they're using one for a parking lot, I think that's a pretty cheap parking lot.
And they could consolidate, but a lot of them don't want to because it reduces the flexibility in the future, but it could stay like that for 20 years.
For business, that's not a massive change.
No.
I'd say 15% cap.
Before we kind of finalize, is there anything else that we want to talk about? Is there any opportunity? I know some of our discussions, we do need to get better at making asks, especially of the MD. I think they pretty much highlighted that. You guys don't ask, so you don't get. That's kind of the way it came across. So I think we need to do better in saying, hey, we're replacing our arena floor and we'd like the MD to participate. I don't know how they want those requests always necessarily, but I think I'd like to sit down with either the Reeve or one of their counselors and ask how that's supposed to work.
I think, Mr. Mayor, the point is to bring them in at the start of the conversation. Instead of once everything's picked and the dollar value's picked and are ready to construct, they want to be involved beforehand. And that's been a long-standing sort of staple with the MD is if you didn't bring us in early, then we're really not involved and not interested. But, so I think a big project like that, we just bring them in at the start, say, hey, this is what we're doing, even a letter, and say, hey.
Yeah, and that's fair, but something like an arena floor, like, it's not like, what are you gonna do different? Are they gonna, so I think for some of those projects, I'm of the opinion we can even make an ask now, like, well, why not, right? It's a large capital investment, and maybe they would participate, so that could help us to some degree on our budget as well. And if there's projects in the future, yeah, I would agree. I think some of the hesitancy is the more people you have around the table, things take longer and things get more complicated. So yeah. Anything else on the budget? Concerns? Questions? 25. Honestly, it doesn't matter. To me, that's a pretty small number to be working with, 15. I honestly, it's weighted towards non-res, which is where we're needing to encourage development on some of those properties. So I think it would hopefully encourage them either to consolidate, which will bring their taxes down, because automatically that land is not assessed on its own as part of a grouping. So I think their assessment as a whole will come down, plus they have a lower mill rate. So I think we strongly encourage consolidation. If they don't want to, then they just have to pay the extra. Yeah, go ahead. We can take a straw poll. Aaron? Christina? David? Right. So we should raise it 100%? Okay. Jim?
Yeah, I'm 10 too.
So I'm a tiebreaker then, right? Yeah.
I will say it comes at a time when we may be potentially reducing their mill rate and their assessments, so their value of their property is going up, the mill rate is going down. So these are both good things for
For the
non-res.
the developer.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the questions I'd have for the assessor is, the year before, commercial went up 1%, and now it's going up 7%, so what's changed?
Say again. You said that fast.
Last year when he came, residential went up 13% and non-res went up 1%. This year, it's 8 and 7. So what's happened in the commercial that would increase it by much more than last year?
More properties, I think is probably the biggest one. And well, and there's others too. But yeah, I think there's probably more properties that have sold too. So they may have more numbers to work with. But yeah. So
Yeah, I
let's
think-
split it
oh,
12 and a
sorry.
half.
I was just gonna say, I think 2 years ago, the non-res was like 13% it went up.
Yeah.
So it's,
Just throw it in at 12 and a half there, Miranda, and see where that lands. Yeah, that, oh, you have to go down one more yet. Any other discussion on this one? Chris, are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. I can build that into the next budget document for sure.
Yeah, check to make sure that 6 and the 1.5 makes sense based on what I threw in there. I think it should be close. It's interesting the way the school tax works. I think that's the first time we can,
It's the first time we've had a real
yeah,
larger conversation about it. Now I'm gonna dive into it and do an analysis and give you guys a Coles Notes version of how the thing works.
okay, if that's all for discussion on this budget, I imagine we'll see it back to us for first reading
April 13th.
April 13th, so that's 4 weeks away. And that is all for tonight. The meeting is adjourned.
When's the auditor coming?
Auditors coming reserve transfers are Monday. Auditor comes to present financial statements the 13th also.
Are we getting draft copies